Hello, mama, woman, birth worker. I'm so excited and grateful for the opportunity to be sharing here with you today. My name is Emilie, and I am a quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner. That's a mouthful. I'll explain more about that later. I'm also a wife, a mother of three, homeschooling mother of three. My eldest is 9 years old, so I have been on this mothering path for about 10 years now already. And I'm also a yoga teacher and birth and postpartum doula. And I lead homeschool pods from my home, and also circles for girls and circles for women. One of my kind of greatest missions at the moment is helping to create a new microculture in this greater popular culture that we kind of live in. I'm looking to curate and create with the people that I'm interacting with a new and kind of, I guess, higher, healthier culture for myself to live in and also for my kids. So that's about me. But I wasn't always in this place of knowing what I wanted to do and how I was going to create it for myself and for my children. If some of you are kind of starting on your path of motherhood, it could probably feel a little bit overwhelming, right? About all the information, the new things that we have to learn, the old things that we have to unlearn. And that kind of shifts a lot in our world, with our family, with our friends. It's like everything can kind of turn upside down depending on where we're coming from. So I started off 10 years ago as someone who had recently come out of university, achieving high grades in an engineering degree actually, and having grown up in a very allopathic medicine way of life, being pretty ill, and it was a very hard time trying to find my path and what I wanted to do. But I knew that there was big problems in the world, that I didn't really want to live in that world. And the only way to go forward and to keep living for me was that I would be kind of finding a whole new community of people, a whole new culture, or helping to create what I was seeking. And then I got pregnant, which motherhood was such a blessing for me. It gave me such purpose and meaning to my life. But because I got pregnant in kind of a place of instability, didn't really have a job, I had a new relationship, I didn't have great, solid family or community support at all. It was a pretty dark time. That first pregnancy, that first postpartum, there was a lot of anxiety. And in the postpartum time, that anxiety, when we're kind of in a state of anxiety for too long a time, the body and system can't really handle it, and it shuts down and it needs to rest. And so I experienced a pretty dark postpartum phase when my daughter was about 1 year old. And that again was a time to kind of look within and shift and commit, fully commit on a deeper level to this new path that I was seeking and creating. And so at that point, that's when I became a birth doula, and I was attending births in hospitals with refugee women. And I didn't birth my first daughter in a hospital. She was born in a birthing center with midwives. It was a pretty awesome birth. And what I saw in hospitals just kind of blew my mind as to what the doctors were doing to women, how they were treating women of color as well, and refugee women. I had never really experienced or witnessed racism in that sense before. And it kind of just blew me out of the water, woke me up to a lot of things that exist in our reality today. And so also what was also really hard is as I was choosing this new path, I didn't have any really mentorship or support from the women, the elders in my community, in my family, and I had to really work hard to find the friends and to seek the people out who could kind of support me and be with me and walk with me on this path. So what my talk is about today is maybe less kind of information about how to have the birth of your dreams, or how to eat well for pregnancy, or about how terrible the medical, allopathic system is. And of course, we'll get into that. I think that there are still some benefits to our allopathic system, but how they treat, view, and support women in birth is pretty counterproductive to successful birth outcomes for mother and baby. You probably know that, and you're listening to the other talks by these other wonderful women. What I want to focus on today is how do we be through this whole journey? How do we, what is the state of beingness and grace that allows us to walk this journey in a way that is more easeful, more loving, more joyful as well, more playful as we walk this path? Because what I have found, what I have seen in my personal experience and also supporting other women, is that if we're in a family or in a culture, living in a community that is going in this direction, and we then choose to go in this direction, it can be a really intense process to break away and walk this other path. And so that's why this talk is for the conscious leadership for the alternative mother. What do I mean by alternative? I mean by basically women who are choosing a different path than the overculture. So the subtitle for this little talk is listening to your intuition and going with your flow while going against the flow of the overculture. The overculture is just a word coined that I got from Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves, which is a book that I highly recommend for any woman kind of looking to wake up her wild side. And she's a psychoanalyst, Jungian psychologist, and she teaches through stories. And I absolutely love her work. So she talks about the overculture and how the overculture tries to kind of make everybody the same, make everybody conform, take all the people and shave them down, cut their heads off, cut their limbs off, and make everyone the right shape and size that they can fit into the different puzzle pieces of this overculture, this great system that is kind of moving forward with its own momentum. And of course, she encourages us to not let ourselves be cut up into pieces, to remain whole, to be who we are, and that our unique paths, our unique dreams, our unique gifts that we're all born into this world with are needed for this collective of humans to grow and live in the best way possible. And I would argue for the earth as well. And yes, and that we have to honor them and walk those paths, basically. So that's the overculture I'm referring to. So as alternative women, and this can be in the areas of how we're going to educate our children, how we're going to birth our children, the healthcare choices we make for ourselves and for our children and our family members, our religious and spiritual choices that we're making. I'm likely forgetting an area of life, but I believe that we're at a time of great revolution and change, that there's been a certain amount of buildup, certain systems that have been built that have served a certain purpose, that were built with a certain intention. And now we're at a time of looking at what works and what doesn't work and breaking things down, building them up, or at the same time just building completely new systems and realities and alternatives on the side. So that's what I'm talking to today. And my 3 steps for remaining in a state of grace and beingness through this whole process as we navigate our way are listening, centering, and take a step. Listen, center, and take a step. Just take a step. This is coming from someone who is, I'm quite a sensitive being, and I also have very, very big dreams and ideals sometimes that I want to live up to, as I'm sure many of you do as well. You know, maybe we want a perfect birth, or we want our children to have perfect health. And sometimes it can feel like very overwhelming. I tend to, that's like one of the things that personally I'm working on is overwhelm. And I see this in, in the mothers that are in my community and that I work with as well, a sense of like wanting to control, a sense of making everything perfect, and a sense of overwhelm at trying to achieve this. And so for me, these 3 little steps help me in every single step of the way, whether I'm in pregnancy, working through some big emotions or some big fears, or whether I'm figuring out how I want to homeschool and educate my 9-year-old, or thinking about how to run a successful business. So listen, center, and take a step. Now, this little talk, these ideas are also very much inspired by a creature in nature. And that creature is Salmon Mother. I live very close to a river here in Collingwood, Ontario. And for 4 or 5 years now, every fall, we walk the trails that are by our house, and we see the salmon going up the river. And I don't know if you've ever seen salmon go up the river. You know, they're pretty big fish, like this big, this round across. Some of them are really big. And we are about 3.5 kilometers from Georgian Bay, which is a big kind of lake, a big open, space of water where they live. And in the fall, they choose to go up the river 3.5 kilometers, maybe further, 4 or 5 kilometers, to lay their eggs upriver and upstream. And this fall was there was a difficult time where my 3rd child, my son, who is now 18 months old, he was free birthed with my husband and I just in that bathroom behind me. He was not sleeping for about 3 or 4 weeks, like very little sleep. And I didn't have much help or support from family at that time. And I just felt very lonely, and I felt very angry, a lot of rage. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think a lot of moms can relate to these feelings of anger and rage and frustration that come up from just being completely overwhelmed. And in this time, also, I find sometimes sleep deprivation can put us into some interesting meditative states. So we can actually access some interesting parts of our consciousness and, live and work from our subconscious. And so I like to try to see in every challenge and every hard thing that I'm going through, how can I use this as a learning lesson and as an opportunity to grow, because that's all it is. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow. And so I was going on these walks and observing the salmon, making their way upstream. They sometimes go through water that is this shallow. They will jump over obstacles. They will swim on their side so that they can go through the more shallow water. They can make sometimes a big fuss and make a lot of noise as they go through the river. But I'm amazed at their steadfastness. They don't give up. They get bumped and bruised, and when they get to the end, some of their scales have fallen off. It's not very pretty. reminded me a little bit as to how I felt in that moment as well. Bumped and bruised and cracked open and a bit destroyed by motherhood. And they keep going. And why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? They're doing it to lay their eggs so that their young can be born in a safer, more beautiful, more nourishing environment than they would have been born if they were born out in Georgian Bay. And to me, it just hit me that that's kind of like what I'm doing in my life and what I see a lot of other women doing in their lives as well, who are, you know, making things up as they go, creating community, creating a way of life that doesn't exist right now. And yes, at the end of this trip, the salmon, you know, the mothers, they lay their eggs and they die. And part of me was like, ooh, if I'm looking at salmon and looking at this whole story, I'm not going to talk about the death part. And then I realized, nope, like that's an important piece. It's an important piece because what I have found with each baby is that I'm, you know, and I see this with other women as well, each baby transforms us. Each pregnancy, birth, postpartum recovery is an opportunity for transformation. And with any transformation, you begin with one thing, you know, there's a period of change and shift, and on the other end, there's a different reality. And so that means saying goodbye to this reality, the death of that reality, and the birth of this new reality. So we'll often see people talk about mothers birthing themselves as they birth their babies. And I truly believe that with every child, we are birthing a new version of ourselves, and that means also at the same time allowing an old version of ourselves to die away. Sometimes that can be, you know, a difficult experience for women to let go of their pregnant self, or let go of their maiden self, or let go of the life that they had before baby came along. And I will mention Yolanda Norris Clark. I have her book here, Portal, which I do recommend. She just birthed, of course, her 10 baby at the age of nearly 43 years old. And she talks about how there is an aspect of her that selfishly loves to give birth and have babies because she's looking forward to that personal transformation on all levels: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And I love that she touched upon that in that book, because I actually feel the same. That I love bringing children into the world, for many different reasons. And one of them is the incredible opportunity for transformation, the inner transformation that I experienced through that whole journey. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the quantum healing work that I do. This might, for some of you, depending on your religious or spiritual foundation and belief system, be a bit of a stretch. But I would encourage you maybe to stay with me and listen with an open heart and mind. And at the end of the talk, take what resonates and leave the rest. Now, this work does involve exploring, kind of relaxing our mind and just opening up our consciousness to seeing where we go and what we see, so that we can get information that will help people in the very best way in this moment of time. And I have worked almost exclusively with women, mostly with mothers, in this way. And when we open our mind and consciousness, a lot of people access past life information. Most of the people I work with access other life experiences on Earth. Now, this is pushing your boundaries a little bit. Hang on there. Because for me, I don't hold too tightly to the idea that this is definitely someone's past life, and we hold on to that idea very tightly. What's important for me is that the story holds, a juiciness, an aspect to it, a certain symbolism that is going to open up certain parts of our hearts, of our minds, allow us to let go of certain stories or beliefs that are no longer serving us. Like, that is the crux. So as I speak, here for that kind of story that is opening up different aspects of your hearts and mind. And so in that work, we also access people's higher selves, where I get to ask questions to, in a deep state of relaxation and meditation. I get to ask questions to their higher self, their inner voice, their intuition. It's like, everyone has these voices, these nudges, these things that are inside of us that are pushing us forward, that are kind of guiding us through our life. And in my work, I get to talk to these parts of people, for a whole hour, turn the volume up like 10 times so that we can really bring it up to the surface and have the person hear it more clearly. And one of the things that people's inner voices say a lot of the time is that in order to have what they want in their life, it's not necessarily about the things that they're doing externally, but more about how they're being about it, which brings me to what I was saying earlier in the introduction, this state of beingness. For example, so one person's higher self talked about control as a signpost for frustration as a signpost for control. So that, when she's frustrated with her kids or frustrated with her home or frustrated with her husband, it's because she's trying to control too much and there isn't enough space for surrender and trust, for example. Another woman, in terms of answering questions about money and attracting abundance to her life, was told from her inner voice to let go of fear internally, and to that the more she worries and the more she fears, she's just feeding that machine, and that's what she's going to be attracting. And I think this applies, very strongly to birth. There's, many women who have beautiful workshops about managing and dealing with our fears around birth. And one thing that I recommend to women in terms of our fears around birth is to really look at them without feeding them. We're just kind of looking at them. We're saying, like, okay, I'm bringing you up, I'm looking at you. What's the fear? Maybe speaking it out loud to some women or friends. And then we close the book of fear and we put it down, we put it away, and we say, okay, it's over there. Some of them are here, and we keep going anyway. So, and again, that is like an inner work that we have to do as we walk this path. So let's get into the kind of 3 steps for finding that inner state that will allow us to walk forward with the most love and grace possible. And now, as I talk about this, I do want to preface it by saying that it is a practice. It's a practice, and over time you're going to notice and learn from yourself how you navigate different situations. And it can take time to learn. It can also not take time to learn. Some of this might be review for some of you, or be unnecessary for some of you. For me, it has taken about maybe 10 plus years, 15 years to learn, and I'm still also practicing it. There are moments right before I have my bleed or just after my bleed where the overwhelm, and the tears, it all is just flowing up. But I will kind of get to that. But those are, again, juicy moments and juicy opportunities for more growth and shedding and letting go. So we have listening, centering, and taking a step in love. Listening, centering, taking a step with love. So the first step, listening, involves centering into ourselves and being able to like hear and feel our inner guidance, or like pull to go somewhere. So when we think of the salmon mother, they have an instinct that at some point in the fall they get called to go upstream. They feel this desire, they feel this urge, they feel this pull, and they act on it, right? Animals don't really question their instinct. And I think, of course, I believe we're both like earthly kind of animalistic creatures, but also divine spiritual creatures. And so certainly I'm not saying here to act on all of your animal instincts. There's a level of discernment that has to happen. I think as we get to, learn how to work with our inner voice, most of the inner voices I talk to are incredibly divine. It's like a higher, wise, loving, closer to the divine aspect of ourselves. It's like our highest potential that actually, if we lived in a state of relaxation, we were able to release a lot of the, heavier emotions and blocks that we're holding, we could actually live from this place 100% of the time. I truly believe it. I actually think that's one of the keys to bringing more peace and harmony and freedom and abundance, to all humans, is if all humans were to live from this place, especially our leaders. So how do we hear? How do we listen? Some of you might already be, hearing and listening to this part of yourself, and others might be like, I can't hear it at all. I don't know. I can't hear. And so one of the things that I like to do when there's like a stuckness about things is giving, there could be a stuckness and like a grasping of, I really want this. I really want to be able to connect to my intuition and hear it. I think that a pregnancy and birth, of course, and postpartum are actually created for the woman to be able to access her intuition. Why? Because in pregnancy, a lot of you will experience mom brain in postpartum as well, where like our brains just don't super function super well. And I don't think that that's by accident. I think it's because we're not meant to actually be thinking too logically and intellectually. Why? Because we have a deeper and more intuitive, actually more genius part of ourselves that we can tap into. And pregnancy, birth, and postpartum is forcing us to tap into and live from this place. And by doing so, we will actually raise our children better, right? And we will birth better, and we will tend to our babies better when we're coming from this place. So if you're already pregnant, great. That's a first step for connecting to your intuition. I definitely recommend, like some kind of a meditation practice. There's so many different practices, but just giving 5 minutes to sit in silence every day, focus on your breath a little bit, and just say, if I were to hear something from my intuition, what would it be? If there was a message from my intuition right now, what would it be? Just that simple. Just that simple. And of course, I'm working on a course to go a little bit deeper and to support women, in different techniques and journeys and things that we can go into. But, just finding a practice for yourself to just be simple, turn everything off, focus on the breath, relax the body, and be open to receive. And you can put your hand on your womb, on your heart, on your head sometimes, and see where your intuition wants to speak to you from. Beautiful place, of course, is our womb. I like to ask sometimes, if my womb were to say something to me right now, what would it say? Or what message would it give? It can be an image, it can be, a pull, it can be a kind of audio message, it can be absolutely anything. Play with it. Just be open to allowing these worlds to open up and speak to you and be able to hear them. A few other little tips for, listening or hearing our intuition is to follow joy and follow beauty. So, very simple things. If something makes you happy, brings you joy on like a deep, I would say like psycho-spiritual level, then that is a key of something to follow and go towards, right? I think the Salmon Mother maybe knows what's waiting for her, knows she's going to get bashed up, knows how hard it's going to be. But I think that there's maybe a feeling of exhilaration, of joy, of excitement at the challenge, and also of knowing that in the end, it will be worth it, for the next generation. So following our joy and following beauty, things that we find beautiful. And I would define something beautiful as something that, lifts and opens the heart. Like you expose yourself to it and you just feel uplifted in a way. Music, music, plants, being outside, being with children, being with people you love, maybe artwork, working with beauty. And the more that we expose ourselves to joy and beauty and allow ourselves to receive, then we will be able to receive and hear the guidance and feel the pulls from our intuition, and from our higher guidance, from the higher sources as well. So the next step is centering, which I just did. I kind of just brought myself back. Because there was something that I wanted to add along the lines of joy and beauty, that depending on our background, our personal history, our ancestral history, and this kind of comes to centering, we might not have built a very strong capacity for holding maybe much joy or beauty or feelings of safety in our bodies. And this can be a practice to expand, right? Like, am I willing to expand and hold more and receive more? And I'm going to share some things, since we're in, I guess, a bit of a closed container. This might not be something for younger ears, like the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds and above. I will keep the vocabulary tasteful, of course. I recently, was working with this idea of receiving and honoring my husband and opening up to receiving from him. And I realized that in our intimate moments, I can definitely be the one who tends to rush things and get to the end result, the exciting end result. But after this pregnancy, and now that my bleed has returned and my libido has returned a 1.5 years after birth, in the past few months, I have been opening up to holding more charge, right? So more of the pleasure of intimacy, more of that charge in my body while we're actually connecting. And it's been a very interesting experience to think of like holding more charge before there's actually like a release or a climax of a certain type. And Kimberly and Johnson has a beautiful book called Into the Wild, Call of the Wild. And she talks about this kind of somatic practice of opening up to being able to hold greater amounts of these charges, and she doesn't actually label them as positive or negative or good or bad emotions. She talks about them as being red and blue, right? So not ascribing a positive or negative charge, or like a wanting or a resisting of something, but just being able to hold the charge in our bodies, opening up the expanse. Again, coming back to the theme of the water and rivers, it's like I see it as I can have like a small stream of joy and beauty and security and love in my life, or I can have like the St. Lawrence River, right? And I love just sitting with that idea of the St. Lawrence River, of this beautiful, great charge of water and flow that I'm able to hold and feel in my body. And so that might be, something for you to explore as you explore hearing and listening, is like, how much can I listen? How much can I hold? How much can I access? And that can I expand, in time, the boundaries of how much can be held in my being. So with the practice of centering, for me, this applies to placing ourselves firmly where we are, being exactly where you are. And that means placing ourselves in this body, placing ourselves in our storyline of time, our storyline of our families, our ancestry, our storyline of our culture, maybe of our country, and the storyline of our soul stories as well, for those of you who might believe in reincarnation. And I find that centering in this way, grounding, it's like it is coming to a place of acceptance, and of also like digesting any of the emotions that are present is also part of centering. So there's a lot of work that comes into centering. And I find this very important because any step that we then take forward, I see it as like, if you're standing on the ground, on the solid ground, and you want to take a step forward, you're well anchored to push off and be able to move forward. If you're standing on a surface of ice and you want to take a step forward, you're going to slip and fall flat on your face, or you might be able to take 2 or 3 steps, but if you're not careful, any little misstep or imbalance, and whoop, you're gone. You're going to be destabilized. And so this practice of centering and coming to really accept and see the reality is important work. And so there's a few things here that I want to touch upon. Of course, if we're working more deeply, we can get into the specifics, and there's so far to go. But a few things that I think are important are honoring our mothers and grandmothers. So wherever you are in your journey, whatever your relationship is with your mother and grandmothers, they might be here on earth still, or have passed to the other side. Still being able to honor and really see their journeys and understand their journeys, have compassion for what they went through. Personally, I spent many years feeling very angry towards my mother, and I see that in many of my friends and many of the women that I work with as well. And I think that the past, few generations have been very hard and challenging. Past few generations, okay. Maybe the past 3 or 4 millennia have been very hard on womanhood, right? And there's a talk now of this resurgence of the divine feminine and women kind of waking up to their feminine power. And I love all of it. I'm here for all of it. And so we can remember that our mothers and grandmothers, didn't have maybe the support that they needed. And also they didn't have access to the internet like we do, which has been an amazing resource for many of us to learn and grow. And again, coming back to centering and coming back to our soul story, I believe that those of us who are here, who have had those difficult experiences and who want to create something different, none of that is by accident. That We are here because we are strong enough to be breaking down those systems and building up new systems, or building up new systems from scratch. We are strong enough. We are strong enough for it. And we just have different jobs and different purposes and different, spirit missions, soul missions here on this planet at this time. And for me, fully, deeply accepting that and honoring that, and accepting and honoring my mother with where she's at, what she's able to give, it has been transformational. I do see some women, I know a few who have really good relationships with their mothers, and they haven't had the desire to, or had the need to really make, create a different path, because it's been comfortable for them. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. It just means that that's part of their journey. And another big part of centering is willingness, right? So am I willing to take the next step in this direction? Am I willing to process this emotion? Am I willing to honor my mother? Am I willing to see, to be able to have compassion for my mother and her journey, and my grandmother's? Am I willing to have compassion for myself? Am I willing to center right now, or do I want to rush? Right? There's actually ultimately no right or wrong question to this. I think that being truly honest with exactly where we're at, that's part of the centering. So if our willingness is not to center in the moment, then great, we know where we are. And we're actually on sort of more solid ground than if we were lying to ourselves and forcing ourselves into the work, right? So I love to look at what am I willing to actually look at and work on and process and digest right now. And an interesting part about this willingness piece, and being really honest as to what I'm willing and have the capacity to do right now, allows me to honor other people's willingness. So if they are not willing to look at something or confront something within themselves in their life, then I honor that. Why? Because I honor what I'm willing and ready to take on at this moment of time. So another part of centering would be to be processing emotions, or allowing emotions to fully be present. I've heard, someone, Bella Lively, who I love and adore her podcast. She said at one point that people are emotionally constipated. Most people are emotionally constipated. And because in her work, she helps people process their emotions and connect to their inner voice. She's also now working with past lives, which is interesting, and I incorporate aspects of her work into my work. But definitely the emotional piece is a beautiful piece to work through. And I'm not going to get too much into detail about how I kind of work and process with my emotions at the moment. But one aspect is like, am I willing to look at this, and am I willing to feel? I actually have the mantra, like, I'm willing to feel. I'm willing to feel whatever comes up. I'm willing for this to be here. And so on the most difficult days of, like, in the bleed or in pregnancy, so I was pregnant during COVID with my third child, and that was it was like the pressure that created the diamond, okay, let's put it that way. And there were a lot of moments of emotional upheaval, of big waves of feeling completely abandoned by my family, through the mandates, and that whole debacle. But I did come to this place of, like, fully allowing the emotions to be, and fully feeling them, fully crying them out, there were some incredible crying sessions, making some, interesting sounds and screams and wailing, mostly over the feelings of abandonment. And they connected back to feelings from my childhood, feelings of abandonment from my childhood. And I just had this feeling of, I'm willing to let this be here. I'm willing to feel it. I'm willing to go into it, like, fully. And it takes courage to allow ourselves to go to those depths. But I think it's part of that expansion of the more that we expand to be able to hold love, beauty, joy, security in our river, we actually have to expand our capacity to hold some of the darker, more uncomfortable emotions as well. I think that actually that's like what breaks down the barriers. It's almost like the barriers of that river being small are all the constipated emotions on the sideline, and when we can feel them and allow them to be, then they break away and the river expands, and like everything can be expanded. Okay, I don't know if that's too poetic for you guys, but that's the experience that it's been like for me. And I do want to touch upon, other people's opinions and choices, because one thing that I found as I was early on this path of, so this is like the straight path that, the overculture is taking, and most people, the majority of people are taking, and I went this way and was like, nope, I don't like that path, I'm going this way. Like the salmon, she says, I don't like what's going on in this lake with what you guys are doing, where you're laying your eggs, like I want to go up that river, right? And in the beginning, I think this is something that many people go through, is wanting other people to also come this way. It's like, I have found this path now, this is the right path, and you guys need to come with me, and if you don't, you're wrong, right? You're wrong, or you're gonna get hurt, or as the list goes on. I had once an interesting conversation with someone close to me about taking vaccines in pregnancy. I think there were like 3 or 4 doses of Tdap and COVID, and I think the flu shot in pregnancy. And of course, having learned what I've learned and what I've seen and witnessed, I said, I'm actually, this was a big moment of fully revealing myself, just very honestly. And I just said, in my world, that is a really dangerous thing to do. Like, in my world, that could be really harmful for the baby. And the other person, this friend, like, took it in and digested it. And I think because it was said not in a way of attack, but in a way of like, whoa, this is my perspective on it, and I'm just gonna lay it out here. I'm gonna lay it out for you. I'm not gonna attack you with it or expect you to take it on, because this is just where I'm at. And she continued her journey within allopathic medicine, and that child is now 2.5, and he's fine. We never know what is ultimately fine. I don't know the intricate details of her life. I don't know how he's going to be when he's 10 or 20, but he's generally fine, and she's fine, and they're all fine. And I think that as we navigate these worlds of finding our paths and of holistic medicine and finding like the right way for us, we can tend to sometimes turn around and say like, well, if this is right, then that's wrong. And we try to convince ourselves that our choices are right, like we become very righteous. And then we start condemning anyone who doesn't make the same choices. And it's been very interesting in my life to be very close to people who like to love them so deeply, to have these close relationships with people who are not at all on the same page as I am. And initially I thought it was like so heartbreaking. It was the worst. I just wanted someone close to be like me and think like me and do things like me. But I can finally see 10 years later that this has been the greatest gift, I think, on this journey of, one, forcing me to really take note of where I'm at and what's important for me and what's really true for me. Not being obsessed with the idea of being right? So like maybe they're right. I don't know. Maybe there will be a problem with my kids. Sometimes we make decisions and then I think we like over convince ourselves that it's the right choice, that it's the absolute right choice. Like if I choose free birth, then I'm a free birth warrior. Free birth is 100% the only way, the best way to birth. There's no other way. Anything else is in captivity, and women are not being responsible. They're not sovereign enough if they're birthing in the system, like this kind of energy. And it doesn't serve the wellness of the whole, and I think it's also not true, because I've even supported a woman who once had an epidural, and from my perspective it was like, oh my god, she had an epidural, like she wasn't connected to her baby, she wasn't spiritually present, she didn't have all the hormones flowing that could have been flowing. But that woman was like extremely happy and pleased with her birth. And sure, maybe she didn't unlock and access certain depths that could have been available to her with a more physiological birth, but for her in that moment in time, it was the perfect experience for her growth. So all that to say that, especially if you're a young mother kind of starting on this path, you're going to be encountering these different things, and to walk along this road with grace, and to trust other people's willingness, to honor your own free will and other people's free will. And that is all part of centering, because it's coming into processing, digesting our emotions. I guess the last one that I did want to touch upon was anger, like mother's rage. I had a few conversations with different women about rage and resentment. Releasing resentment in my marriage has been such a gift. And the reality is, as we center, as we come into the storyline of humanity's story on earth at this time, is that we don't support women in the ideal way for pregnancy and birth and postpartum and mothering. We don't support families. I'm saying the overculture. I believe that that the knowledge for supporting families and young children in the best way were known in cultures past. Personally, in my past life regression experiences, that it's like all my consciousness chooses to show me almost, is different lifetimes where pregnant women are cherished and honored and supported and cared for by the entire community, by young children to teens to the elderly, because they understand that a woman's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual state in pregnancy strongly affects the baby, and that the better that she can be nourished and taken care of, the better the baby will be. And I spent a lot of time being very angry that I didn't have this. And again, that's like quite a charge that does affect the children, that affects my family, that affects my physical body. Resentment towards my husband for maybe not making more money and supporting us, in the way that I wanted to be supported and felt like I needed to be supported. And again, it's not to say that that's not true, that women, so of course women need more help, and it would be great if our husbands made enough money that we didn't have to worry and we were like completely comfortable. But centering ourselves in the reality of where we are in our culture, For me, it was just like a full acceptance, and also a deep relationship with God, Creator, that it's not by accident, that I'm not here by accident, with these thoughts and feelings. And so I fully allowed that rage to happen. There was one moment, an argument that I had with my husband, where I yelled in like this full guttural yell that was like releasing so much rage. And I don't necessarily recommend like dumping our emotions onto someone else as a way of processing, but this is just how it happened for us. And I'm blessed with my husband who can hold me through that. And it was processed, and it was let go. And I was like, okay, well, like if I'm not angry anymore, then now what do I do? And without that anger, without the constant churning of thoughts in my mind of what everyone should be doing, how they should be helping, I'm able to have energy to do things like this and actually help other women, or host circles, or talk to the girls and actually contribute to shifting and changing the culture, curating a new culture that will teach the next generation what needs to be done. Mother's guilt is another whole can of worms that we can go into, but I'm not going to touch upon that today. Okay, so the last step, so we had listening, centering, and taking a step with love. So that's the last step, is take a step. Take a step with love, right? So with love means that when we've centered, we've allowed all the emotions to be there. We've, fully felt them and seen them in our body and given them space to exist without resisting. And then, usually when that happens, they dissipate, Are we willing to think differently, see the world differently, or act differently in a way that that is informed by that emotion? And I think that once that happens, the emotion just dissipates and lets go. And so then we can take a step with love. And one thing that I've noticed is that in my body, I can actually feel the difference. Like when there's a feeling of resentment, it's becoming a foreign thing in my body and in my being. When I feel like anger and frustration towards another person, and in my family, with in-laws and different things that happen, like there are plenty of opportunities to have those emotions come up. But in my body, they're becoming more and more foreign, where when they come up, it's like, ooh, what is that, And then I'm willing to look at it, willing to digest it and process it through, and then willing to take a step. So that's the external work, right? That's the choices that we're making. That's the words that we're saying. It's even the thoughts that we're thinking. It's all the actions that we're taking from this place of like listening, our connection with our inner self, or higher, the higher realms, centering in our reality and digesting our emotions, and then taking a step with love. And there might be like a lot of big things. We might have big dreams, especially if you're, younger. I'm still young. I have like huge dreams. And like I mentioned at the beginning of that young woman 10, 15 years ago who felt so lost, so out of touch with herself, so out of love with herself. To be here now, it felt like a Mount Everest mountain to climb. It felt like an impossible feat. And so if that's where you're at and you feel like it's an impossible feat, and there might be days, sometimes it's just a day where it feels the overwhelm is crazy. I just take a step. And again, I come back to this willingness. If there's a huge feeling of overwhelm, I say in my mind, am I willing to shift? Because we can get addicted sometimes to our like negative emotional cycles and thought patterns, and there's just this opening for a question: am I willing to shift? Am I willing to shift? Am I willing to take a step? Am I willing to live in a way that I'm not carrying this heavy overwhelm on my shoulders? Am I willing? And so there might be this Mount Everest of our dreams. Have them. It's beautiful. You know, one thing I think of, like the fish in the lake that don't want to go up the river, they've given up on their dreams. A lot of people, they have, reluctantly accepted the life that they have and their circumstances. And I think that there's a big difference between centering and acceptance and reluctantly accepting, right? Reluctantly is like, okay, I have no power. I have no power to do anything. This is just it, and I just have to make the best of what it is, versus this is it, this is the reality, and how do I want to move forward, right? So taking a step with love, taking a step on a firm foundation, to another step on a firm foundation, to another step on a firm foundation, little by little. So I think that's all that I had for you beautiful women today. I hope that this was somewhat helpful for you, this little chat. I do plan on making this into like an 8-week container where women can have these conversations about what's happening in their inner worlds as they're navigating, making all these choices and learning all the information, kind of talking more on a emotional, mental, spiritual level about what's happening for us internally, so that we can really improve our state of beingness in the world. So that will be coming this spring. You can send me an email if you're interested in having more information about that. Sandra, who is also a wonderful woman in this group, sharing with you on this platform, she and I are creating an online community of exactly for these kind of conversations, for these kind of topics, talking about birth, pregnancy, motherhood, postpartum, homeschooling, natural healing. And that is an online community that is coming at the end of January. So again, stay tuned for that. On Instagram, I live at Emilie Alexina. I think the information will be posted below. I share about what I'm doing in my daily life with my kids and my work and kind of some insights. So join me there. And of course, my quantum healing work is always available. I love working with women, especially in pregnancy, because I get to combine my love for birth and pregnancy and caring for women in such a beautiful, sensitive time of transformation. And so quantum healing work is available individually and also in groups, both online and in person. And for all of that, you can check out my website or contact me directly at my email address. And, I leave you with a message of, dare to dream, just keep going, go for it, be connected to your inner higher loving self, be open to, receiving support and guidance from the great mystery, from God, Spirit. I meant to bring that a bit more into my talk today, but it's going to be for other work. And dare to dream and keep taking steps along that path. So much love to you, mother, woman on your journey.